We've dealt extensively with decree number 1 as well as decree number 3.
And decree decree
my understanding is that you were there during the passing of decree number 2, 5, 6, and 4.
Decree number 2, 5, 3, 6. Sorry, 2,
4, 5, and 6.
2, 4, degree 3, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
Can you briefly take us through those decrees?
And
depending on how it goes, I may have some interjecting questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Decrees, just for the benefit of maybe the public, decrees are merely rules. You can call them laws if you want, but they are just rules by which the military rule the country.
Pour jamala nafakan decreeol mu fennuleti sojarolu ka menu londi ka tamala pour itelbela ko kala nyamin ibe banko sambala nyamin sartolu menula.
And are common in every military dictatorship. This is what they use to rule.
And sojar mararo lube dawo da nyimukuleti ka menlondi ka tama wale laika wale fo.
Decree number 2 related to the gendarmerie.
O tilinta gendarmerie bundale lanu.
After the dissolution of the Senegambia Confederation, the gendarmerie were transferred to the police.
During Senegambia Confederation of Banta, Sandarmorolu yesawundi ka edundi police la kontoto.
And the chairman who came from the gendarmerie, that's AJJ Jame, wanted this reversed.
And when chairman me ya lonko ate bota Sandarmori la karola chairman ya AJJ Jame ate lafta ukulu yela mandila nu.
He also wanted the National Security Service dissolved.
And lafta bankola kanto nintanka da bunda la duku bunda fanan janjana National Security Service.
So that's what decree number 2 did.
Decree number fulanjang yewoleke.
Decree number 3 we have discussed.
Decree sabanjang ngawakachale.
And well, I have listened to council's opinions on the decree.
And nga council fokalu moile decree na karola.
Decree number 3, and I don't agree with those opinions.
Decree number 3 de between council menu for jam.
Well noted, Mrs. Bensouda.
The decree actually enabled those who were detained to have recourse.
Decree nying ay silo di molle lay menu mutanu pour fanalusi ila kolu tamandino nyaming pour be fansoto la nyaming.
To have a tribunal review their detention.
Pour bunda silo membe jube rokela ila mutarola.
Every 6 months.
Kari woro.
Of course, it could not prevent the vice chairman from exercising his authority.
Aman chairman no lanko bali pour ayala kango tamandide.
But it gave the detainees a chance.
But I silo yele moli yemenu be mutokono.
Decree number 4.
Decree number 4
related to the suspension of political activities.
Tilinta men walem ka politik kunya lube buruka politik party kanatama.
If I recollect, I think the council was very irritated by publications made by Foroya.
Ning hakilo baka council nyi ye kamfa da ba sotong kibar kaito me ba fly Foroya wolnata kumolu menu fintindi kesafe.
And they wanted, since political parties, I think were suspended by decree number 1, so they wanted political activities also to be suspended.
Where decree number 1, where political party lako tonne wotumo, wala na ilafita politiko la karola kukundi nin tamandiro len kuketalom politiko la karola ilafita obeyebo.
Decree number 5.
Decree lulu njao.
Related to local government authorities.
I
think it was at the second council meeting which I attended. They proposed to appoint military officers as mayor and chairman of area councils.
Aning sirantiol men marla area council lakata.
And dissolve the councils, elected councils.
Between council cartel fighter council bunda lumeni purkaulu janjang.
And I advise that this was contrary to the existing provisions of the law. And they instructed that the law should be amended to enable them do that. Decree number 6 is the last decree before I hand it over as Attorney General that I received instructions to draft.
Between decree woronjango welen decree labangoti janninte be bolaje ye kawmendi na prunyanta men safela janninga boji. Now
this decree I had since our first meeting been pushing for the release of the ministers.
Kabirina bem follow numba katakanum puru minister lumenu ye muta puru sebula.
They finally agreed to release them and put them under house arrest.
Inata song puru kebula bari hanimbi ikoy be sindile la bungulu konole amunta bunkono muto ibe wala kelela.
And this decree was drafted to reflect the agreement to release the ministers and put them under house arrest.
Decree lota nyene kanko to nyaay woto be minister bulala le bari ibe sindile la bungulu le kono yake bunkono mutoti ye mutela bungulu kono.
Mrs. Bensouda, let me just comment on decree number 6.
Ms. Bensouda, mbatonga diamu decree number 6 la Carola.
As well as decree number 4.
In decree number 4.
We received some evidence from Omar Jallo, OJ Jallo.
Kuma kongol soto le mi alon ka boda nong Omar Jallo le burika fa OJ.
That whilst he was under house arrest.
Ako jawato mi alon ko ya muta bunkono.
With the rest of the ministers.
Nang minister to malnying.
He was constantly harassed and intimidated by members of the junta. I believe he mentioned Sana Sabali in particular, who would come to his house.
Aka fojane ko komi ka continue ka botandi ka kamfandi continue ka silandi continue tala ko ka nduminko okenu baka wala Sana Sabali.
And beat him up in the presence of his family.
De ka bute fanala dimbal nyala.
There was also another instance where after the passing of decree number 4, suspending political activities, he gave a press conference.
Wati fana sotota wato mina ye decree number 4 nyingi ya londi ya lota wati sotota numfanga nana diamuta kiba talale.
I cannot remember in what particular newspaper. It may have been Foroya.
Ma hakilo ma made kibar kaiti bunda jumale kilimu baraske no ayake Foroya kibar kaiti bundati.
And when that publication was actually out, based on this decree, he was subsequently arrested and abused. Because according to the council, they had banned on all political parties.
Political party
And the point I'm trying to make is that these particular decrees actually created a framework within which he in particular was able to be targeted and his rights violated because they managed to confine him in one place and he was subsequently tortured.
Counsel, I find that question rather strange coming from a lawyer. The best that can happen to anyone is to be released to go home. And what this decree enabled to happen was for ministers to be released to go home. If Mr. Is it Lieutenant Sanasabali went to OJ's house and tortured him, it has nothing to do with decree number 4. What decree number 4 says that anybody, no person shall engage in any political propaganda by means of a newspaper publication, in any other media form for spreading the ideas or ideology of any political party.
politique party killing kana soto me yalon ko isila kumakangulu wala ila dalilul findindi je.
And no person shall in any manner carry on or engage in any political activity. So, and there is a penalty that any person who commits, and if you do so, it's an offense. Any person who commits an offense shall be liable to conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000.
Andu momondin ketawoto momondi yow ma nyake isi muta andum fanan isi kulunyin nako be alamano lale kan mem te mankila dalasi wuli lulola,
which means you'll be taken to court and prosecuted.
Wala mnyinti ko be sambala kiti bunda alla ye kitindi.
My point,
if Sana Sabali went and tortured somebody in their house, what has it got to do with this decree? It has nothing to do with it.
Nin Sana Sabali tata mola bunko no katata jireaje onin decree ni manyoso to femfenna.
according to Omar Jallo's testimony here at the TRRC,
Omar Jallo ay kumakongol mindi TRRC jang.
he stated that the reason why he was dealt with in that particular way was because he was in breach of this decree.
Katugo ako niaje ye wo manya nyin kata decree nyin ay sabrol min landa te mum moldi mi amantara tamaka wala.
And therefore it was used as an excuse to legitimize what was done to him.
That's why I am quite at sea. It's like saying when a police officer, even at this time, brutalizes anyone, it's because the law allows him to do so. In this
particular instance, it is a situation of having the decrees there as a legal framework upon which the AFPRC junta could actually back their actions and give it legitimacy. That is my point.
Coming saying in decree ni aja tataja kadanun tamandir bulo lete mi alonko AFPRC man sakundanya ka tamani wo bulo lela isaje ko isa sujini wala ka foko ebe minke kan fenne mi alonko anin luwa tata nyola.
With respect, that's a wrong view.
Bunya kan wode umujero ti men mantiling.
This decree provides that it's an offense to be engaged in political activity at that time, and if you do so, you will be arrested, taken before a court, convicted, and fined. So if Sana Sabali goes and does whatever he wants, it has nothing to do with this decree. Just a violation of the decree and a violation of the law.
Mokana idabula politik kuto, mokana politik kutamandi, mokana kankularke politiko la karola. Yo aduni meme yake ibe mutalale ye samba ye kitindi aduni ye kitindi ibe nying alamano le lale kan ayole fo barbitum nin Sana Sabali ka wuli akata mola bungo kono kata tajire aje uto decree mo fo.
If he, as member of the council who passed this particular law, and
had all
executive and legislative as well as judicial powers to enforce it, and this is the way in which he actually found it, this is the way in which he chose to enforce it, then that just goes to show exactly the point I was trying to relate in relation to the decrees. That it did not actually provide a framework for regulating the activities of the junta. But rather giving their unlawful acts the force of law. I'm putting it to you.
That is a wrong view of the law. Like any other law, if Sana Sabali violates it, he should be held responsible.
ko loi dol bebe laare nyame ni sana sabali loi salang woto nyanta woduno nyanta lala teleka.
Mrs. Bensouda, who is going to hold you responsible if you are the judge, jury, and the executioner?
Mrs. Bensouda, saying ite mi yalongo ite fonlen kiti telat, ite len kiti tamandil lat. Saying jumal be lola kafo ko ite nyiminke imanya nakake. Jumal be ite fana kiti nino.
That was the power that the decrees gave to the council.
Ato nyin decree nyin wole nyin symbol be di nyin council mol la nyin sojar mol.
Fortunately, that is why now you have the TRRC.
Bidun kunyi nyando kama wala na yeti TRRC sotobi.
And Sana Sabali's actions should be determined in relation to the law that was in place at the time.
Sana Sabali woto alaw kebaro lu inyanta ani uluale suman na membe lori nu wotumo.
And appropriate recommendations made.
Bidun ya marikendo lu meni silo tata nyola isi olu londi.
But what I think would be wrong, as your question seems to insinuate, is to malign or hold as villains those who drafted the law which Sana Sabali did not follow.
Amunta ilafta wolu jelale ko lemu kurungoluti men ya lonko sana sabali amanna bula o sartolu noma.
I'm sure all Gambians are now happy that there is a possibility of accountability and reparation for the wrongs that have occurred.
Lata la sayen Gambian ko mo jamabe se wala ko silanding ala silobe sotonnale pour que buluma sayo ke molu la men ye mantoro taki anim fanan tilimunin to nyabe tamalale men ya lonko e silobula.
Decree number 4 did not sanction
torture
or violation of anybody's liberty or personal integrity.
Mrs. Bensouda, by all means, by no means am I trying to paint the legislators or the draftspersons a villain or to paint you as one.
You are
by no means a villain. You are a highly respected member of our society and a senior lawyer. My senior at the bar. And you have contributed immensely to the justice sector. What I am trying to do is just to get a bit of responsibility or accountability from you. In terms of drafting those decrees, that to some degree enabled Jammeh and members of his junta to do some of the excesses which they did. And the reason why the decrees had retroactive effect was to legitimize their actions. Because they realized that they needed the legitimacy of the law to justify some of the things that they did, and that's why they backdated it. Otherwise, perhaps you could enlighten us and tell us why that was necessary.
Thank you, Council. I'm very concerned, really, about your statement for various reasons. This is a fact-finding process. It's a fact-finding tribunal. And we have to be careful not to promote our individual opinions to the public that are watching. Every society, whether autocratic or military or democratic, needs rules to operate.
Jama wo jama kafu isolata luwa lela sojar bunda bang civilian bunda ba isolata sarto lela itelbe tamala menula.
The decrees did not enable Yaya Jammeh and his regime.
O decree luman sembedi Yaya Jammeh nala molula.
Yaya Jammeh and his group, the junta, took power without any decrees.
Yaya Jammeh nala molu yes banko le wayatar hani decree te kering.
They held power without decrees.
They
arrested people without decrees.
They
tortured people without decrees. So the decrees were intended to introduce order in our society. To give an understanding to the people as to how the military intends to rule. You will not find in any decree that a person can be tortured. You will not find in any decree that they should go into anybody's home and beat them up. That the military did these things was a violation even of their own decrees. So I take no responsibility for anything that Yaya Jammeh did. I take no responsibility for any action of the junta. What I take responsibility for is for doing all my best to ensure that there was a structure in place within which Gambians can find coherence and stability.
Gambian kolu fanalu la taranyasi kunga kono ayke kuti mense molu nafa ayke ku sahari ngoti banko kan ndenga wala kata.
Without decree number 4, for instance,
ning ayata decree number 4 man sort of misali kama
ministers would not have been released to go home.
The minister lubula la puri esai.
If O.J. Jallow was tortured at home,
ni O.J. Jallow tajire ya ala suokono.
But there about, is it 11, you had Omar C, Hassan B. Jallow, Aliu E.W.F. Baji, Landing Jallow Sonko, Sadio Toure, Mbemba Jata, Matthew Yaya Balde, Boubacar Balde, and Alkali James Gay.
Ayo minister le tolu foteng wonya menu be minister yala menu mutanung decree number 4 nata kendi foyebula.
So I think decree number 4 actually was beneficial.
Decree number 4
does not justify Sana Sabali's actions. I repeat, he should be accountable for them.
With the benefit of hindsight, do you believe that the framework within which you provided in the decrees, was it an effective system or not? Considering that they were constantly breached.
Commission ite yin decree min be dada yaje nyadile fo fenne mi yalanka akata ku kendol ti fo nyadilem lafta e fonga la mi kunna miro ye wota fo.
Let me just correct. The stage was set. The Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council, you can go back to the record, was already announced before these decrees.
AFPRC, Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council, yo bunda londile follow janning decree ol fangol bina.
So the framework was based on the stage set by the military.
Ila kuolu sambanya ubebe larin kuolu landinya le kanga itelu sojarulu fangoli ya parendi nyami.
So the framework that was established for military rule, yes, was effective.
Woto ye bunda men landi pour sojal mararo sitama woto mukuleti me yalonko atatale atamatale.
You had the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council.
Ye sojaro law maral council bunda
the cabinet ministers, these are the two organs that were supposed to rule the country.
Ning cabinet minister lu nyimbunda fulo le nyanta banko marala ka samba.
Decree number 4, yes, the ministers were released and went home.
Decree number 4 ha toja ye minister bula isetela sul kono.
And I'm sure many of them were relieved.
Andu ngalonko kete jamale
Mrs. Bensouda, if I can just take you back.
Yes.
Ms. Bensouda,
under decree number 1, in your statement, you said something. You mentioned chapter 3 on the fundamental rights and freedoms was not suspended, unlike the models we reviewed.
Chapter 3 bunda sabanyawani iko molla nyantol nyinga manke fendi mialon ko ya denne ibe tamo kaneno.
And you were talking about the fact that you had reviewed and compared certain decrees from other jurisdictions where there were military rule, and you said this was deliberate on our part.
Ndiko inata jibel kele wala ka kesen ke banku katangol la milialon ko inane decree lual sotole no comme kabul wato mina yesojan man sakundal sote ko e wolbe yani ntol tale kunna taki ya jibe bar ntol minketa janga manke dulato.
You stated that I believe that the ministry could not ensure that to the extent possible human rights were not unnecessarily trammeled.
Ko comme ministre nyata jibero kala foka jego labon fond hadama dingol la nyanta tinya kana ke fendi mi alan ko ba malala.
You were trying to say that basically you were trying to protect human rights here by not suspending the entire constitution. You went on to say that in hindsight, we were naive. Can you tell us why you believe that in hindsight, you were naive?
Thank you for that question. The mere fact that human rights were not suspended in terms of the constitutional protective provisions, does it mean they were respected? Just as the fact that even now that we have a fundamental human rights chapter in our constitution, does it mean that fundamental human rights are not violated under a democratic framework?
But at that point, you were actually trying to protect human rights by putting the proper content into the decrees, and that also shows how much influence you had over the drafting of those decrees.
Coming where me tandi wala nyindiko hani wo be kamfang iba katakana nunka kudol bula kono isaje ko wose hadama dungol la nyanto nyin tankandi no koma nyanta ka tankandi nyami.
I don't know what you mean by influence.
Malonde ila okumo kotomendi kafo ka modo kamolu sondi kudola.
You selected the content of those decrees and you put it to the junta, the junta. And if we look at decree number 1, for example,
ite kundima fong ite le kul tombong ya be bula nyokono ya ke kilomati itata ya landi ji junta mol nyati wala.
You came back from your overseas trip,
ibota na ta mola inata,
went to see the chairman,
itata ka chairman je,
he instructed you on a decree.
Ayamaro dila pour ye decree deda.
On that same day, I don't even know what time you went to visit the chairman, but by the end of the day, Mrs. Bensouda, you had laid before him decree number 1.
Wolung kilongo nying malonde itata in watu jumale fuda da banko kanyam bar wolung kilongo nying kabranga ya maro dila pour decree deda wolung kilongo nyim fongale data yenyin decree number 1 landa nyati wala.
And this had been drafted by your office.
Andu nying decree nyim milia deda milia safe ila office olem.
What time the chairman would have had to review the decree.
Watu jumala nyin chiamano nyin wala sojoro la nyin kuntonko nyin watu jumala nyin decree nyin ka senkan jibe kalo mune bije.
And his ability to do so properly.
Andun ka ke anyama kuma anyanta ka kenyami.
That is what I meant by influence.
Kot ngola wala koto munyenti ko komi ye da dunje wala fe molati mi ko ye long nyin kol kono bakala.
Again, Learned Council, let's put things in context. It's quite clear in my statement.
Council nga kolu jube nge landi itara inyanta lala dinkiralu menuto nyaming.
As I stated,
konga fonu nyaming.
Significant research had already been done by Cherno about the various military establishment decrees from Nigeria and Ghana.
Cherno ye kisi saharin neke wo sartolu to menketa sojaro lawlondi bundaluti ayo ay menukenu Nigeria ni Ghana.
We agreed that these were too drastic.
Msontako woldolu keta fenuleti menu koleata.
Cherno provided a draft decree number 1 reflecting the de facto situation.
Cherno nata sonka decree 1 la kunyalu bondi me ya lonko wolle nata songo kolo la kunga banke nyami.
It formally established the AFPRC and Council of Ministers.
Wale AFPRC bunda fango londi ani minister la council bunda.
Suspended the executive and parliament and modified provisions which were not consistent with the situation.
Ay kunton kol la palaso deng anin député bungo yowlu be tom folo anin kolu men ya lonko wolingo nyaton ka sartolu manta nyola yowlu be dabondi.
So we had precedents.
But doesn't that buttress my point?
Let me just say,
sorry, Mrs. Bensouda,
we had precedents from Nigeria and Ghana, so it wasn't difficult to produce a draft within a couple of hours.
Amunta anin kolu lanya tata nyame woton telu nga silo soto montoro watolu kono pour ka kolu deda,
which was then submitted. That's what drafts people do.
That
doesn't mean the draftsman makes law.
So I did not say that you made law, Mrs. Bensouda. You had influence over the draft because without you, they never would have come up with the precedents, or your office, you and your office. If I say you, I meant the Attorney General's office. They never would have come up with that draft.
Ngo ngam fo doro wala nyindiko komi keta multi mi ala ko yesu te baka nyonko kono ye kan soto jele andu ile amanke ko mbeta fo kundi wala de bari la do ko bunda nyin mbewol to fo kan komi atoni bawo wota mo telebe nu je Ministry of Justice mbewol fo kante.
That is a wrong assumption. That they needed us, Mrs. Bensouda and Cherno Jallo in the ministry in order to produce decrees. That is a wrong assumption.
Mrs. Bensouda ni Cherno puruka wasartolu ani.
If you read my statement, you will see that they reached out to Ghana. And within August, they agreed on technical assistance from Ghana. And by November, they had 2 senior legal officers, Bright Akwete and Samuel Letsu, sent from Ghana. They were not helpless.
This is
and let me finish. Even in August, Ghana sent in a mission by special flight. Lieutenant J.J. Rawlings came in August.
Lieutenant J.J. Rawlings found August Karokono.
I would like to ask you some questions on what you've said before we go there. That's why. Mrs. Bensouda, please, if you can allow me.
So these were not a helpless bunch of people who did not know what to do.
Mukafulem menume keku olonge malong ibe makoiro soto na dami ye makoiro soto le bundalula.
So I'm sure you would agree with me. I can assure you they did not need Amie Bensouda, Cherno Jallo, or even a Fafambai to do what they wanted to do.
Mba bambandile manyilu mansola Amie Bensouda la wala Cherno Jallo wala hani Fafambai puruka silo yitandila itelbe menkela.
I'm glad that you used those three names because they were the ones on the ground. Mrs. Bensouda. A delegation from Ghana could not have usurped the authority of the Attorney General's chambers and drafted decrees for the AFPRC. It could have only been you.
Ministry of Justice decree
and in particular
Ministry of Justice
and in particular, let me finish, Ms. Bensouda. In particular, we were talking about the period before that, when you were acting as Attorney General, and not afterwards. So you must take responsibility for that part. I know that you are averse to that word responsibility, Mrs. Bensouda. But even if it is to draft the decrees, that is a degree of responsibility you must take. Or you ought to take, perhaps,
Learned Counsel. Responsibility is normally a positive word. But when you ask me to take responsibility, I do not think you are being positive or complimentary. I think you are asking me to take responsibility for Yaya Jammeh's actions. I take no such responsibility. Any lawyer can draft law. Any lawyer can draft law.
But you were the one on the ground. No other lawyer was there. You were the one. And you drafted the laws. And with your special skill and ability and expertise on legislative drafting, I don't see how you can actually remove yourself from that responsibility.
Yelondo min soto ka ta fanal la mi yalan ko wolen loi de dalta nin ku ko ton ka dera loi la fanal ndama nyaaje mi yalan ko so wala tano pour que fam bondino nyum ko kon.
The decree numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 were drafted under my watch.
Decrees 1, kabo follow fulanjango, sabanjango, naninjango, lulu fo woronjango. Ha wolde data na mararole kono.
And they were intended to introduce stability.
Andu ye kenyina kama puruka tenkumo sabatindi.
As public servants, civil servants.
Ko mansakunda doku bundalom mansakunda doku laliye.
All the lawyers at the Ministry of Justice could do.
But
to continue to discharge their functions. It was a military government. There was no parliament to make law. So the decrees were needed.
That was also a function of the decrees.
For the decrees were needed for the people to understand what they were under and how they were being ruled. Most of those decrees still survive in our laws. So decree is not a dirty word. We should examine each of the decrees. And in relation to the context, the situation on the ground. To determine whether the decrees in themselves violated the human rights of the people. The situation in which we found ourselves. Objectively. Without overlaying with personal opinion. The decrees that were drafted under my watch helped the situation. And for that I do take responsibility. That I helped the situation. Instead of allowing anarchy to prevail.
wala fisiata nyinti kabula dunyolo ya dumbankoka.
Can you tell us why you believed you were naive, as you said in your statement?
Komi isa fonyo no munat na iteketa moti mialango komi mang londo soto nyimkuola fana wale malong.
I think on a superficial reading of the situation, having met the chairman, and his assurance that there would be no witch hunt,
I
think we thought, both Charno and I, that by not suspending the fundamental human rights chapter in the Constitution, and the junta would actually respect human rights. But unfortunately, they did not. But that is because they used their power. They used their power wrongly. There are military governments that have abounded in West Africa. Not all of them violated human rights to the extent of our own junta. It was not necessary for them to torture and kill people in order to remain in power. They tortured and killed people because they wanted to. They wanted people to fear them, and they used fear as a weapon. It was not enabled by any decree that was drafted under my watch.
And that goes to show the ineffectiveness of the framework which you provided. Which you believed would be appropriate under the circumstances.
Let me take your questions one at a time. Again, that is inappropriate. And why do I say so? Because most of those decrees are in our constitution now, which is supposed to be a democratic constitution.
Democratic constitution already.
So Jammeh should take responsibility. His junta should take responsibility for the tortures, the killings. Nobody in the Ministry of Justice enabled them to do so.
Mote Minister Bundala menu marta kilimunin kitola meyo sembo dila puru yo quota mandiwanya.
We're talking about the
framework was needed. Decrees were needed.
Isulata o decree la no tumo.
Whether I was there or not.
We're talking about the drafting of the decrees in particular. What I just read stated that it was deliberate on your part not to suspend the entire constitution, but only part of it.
Not to suspend fundamental human rights. Yes, it was deliberate.
Yes. So the blueprint.
After the draft went, he could have said no, suspend it. It was just a draft, but he did not. I mean, maybe just in order to
let me just finish. Because you had given us the impression that the blueprint and the ideology behind the decrees came from Jammeh, but to some extent, this shows that you had an input in it. You were able to really choose certain parts if you wanted, remove certain parts, you know, to make it more palatable. Like you said, in order to promote human rights, you decided to do it this way rather than another way.
Comme akabum fo wala ñinti ko ñin degré ñing ita degré ñing ita le ya jibe ya keseng isa e ka fogo comme mil ñenta tara ko na ni mil ñenta mil ma ñana tara ko na pour be dorom pour jamel laftan no minna aso soto no.
Yes, I had an input.
Ha nga kudundi jele.
In order to, as I said in my statement, to at least contain the excesses of the regime. Definitely, I had an input. My input was positive.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bensouda. We'll take that answer and we'll leave it to the Commission to draw conclusions from what you said. I hope so. I believe you wanted to make some brief comments about some other decrees that were passed after your tenure in terms of their violations of human rights. But perhaps you could tell us briefly how you left the Attorney General's chambers.
Thank you, Council. I was in charge for about 2 weeks. And then I handed over to Mr. Mbai. I would just like to comment briefly on his public service. The second week, I think second or third week, must have been mid-August actually. The sacking started. The first set of managing directors were sacked. Together with the permanent secretary of the Office of the President, who was my husband, Mr. Ahmed Bensouda. Permanent secretary and this sent a shockwave through the civil service. And people were quite afraid, coupled with the fact that managing directors had been just arrested and put in Mile 2. And when they removed people, they just substituted them with whoever they wanted. Notwithstanding their competence or their qualification. And they had this mantra that there were a million Gambians to choose from. That is when the attrition started. People just left. Qualified people, highly skilled people. It took 10 years to build up a capable civil service. My minister, Mr. Mbai, together with some other ministers, I think it was Mrs. Jau, they prevailed on the regime to bring back Mr. Wada, Mr. Mustafa Wada, just to stabilize the situation in the civil service. And I think they should be commended for it. I think it could have been worse, but for the intervention, I think, of Mr. Mustafa Wada. He brought maturity back. But it really did not arrest completely the situation of the sackings and the arrest of civil servants. How did I leave? There are decrees, but it's in my statement, decrees that were made that, but I'll just say that I had encounters, personal encounters with the chairman after Mr. Mbai took over. And this would occur when he was out of the country. The first one related to Sonko Jileng Enterprise building on Independence Drive. Because they had put on another another floor on their building, and which had windows facing State House. Fortunately, I was summoned to State House, and the chairman said he wanted to demolish the building. I advised that wasn't necessary. They should get Sonko Jileng to block the windows overlooking State House. I think he was in a good mood that day, and I was fortunate for him to agree. The second time was sometime in December. Mr. Mbai had traveled. I was summoned to his office, and he had some, he said, some allegations against Mr. Mbai. And he wanted me to confirm those allegations. And he really was trying to manipulate me. And he implied that I would be appointed to replace Mr. Mbai if I could confirm those allegations. I told him I did not know anything about what he was saying, because Mr. Mbai was doing a difficult job under difficult circumstances. As Attorney General. And as I was leaving, he called me back. And he said in Mandinka, did I realize that Balafabe Longole Noma? I said I could not help him. And I left. But then I realized my days in the service were numbered, and I packed all my personal belongings from the office. The third time we met, I was the one who sought an appointment through Mr. Wada. Because he had arrested Mr. Beck. This was the managing director of MSG, and put him straight to in mile 2. Mr. Beck managing director of MSG concerning NAWEC. So there was an outcry in the media and by the international community. I went to see him with Mr. Wada to see whether we could get Mr. Beck released. When we went to see him, as soon as I entered his office, he put on his dark glasses and would not let me see his eyes. He listened to me, and then he asked me whether I knew what Mr. Beck did. I said to him, whatever he did, it was counterproductive at that time, having regard to the situation in the country. Because the international community had more or less suspended all help to Gambia. When I tried to speak further, I think Mr. Wada realized that the chairman was kind of getting angry. He kicked me under the table, and I got that as a signal to stop. So I let it go. But a month later, in March, we went on a mission to World Bank. The purpose of the mission was to promote the transition program to the international community.
Bengo dalilo mende wala mnyende transition nyi na sio nyi ila bengo nyi ila fuko nyi puru kataka kirimandi dunia e bantala.
This was drafted by a group of permanent secretaries, including myself, permanent secretary finance, education, and so on.
Me nyi safe wala permanent secretary da ninda fango permanent secretary me alangol be na marali na fulo kunyala abol kono nda fango beje.
And we reported to the committee of ministers comprising Mr. B.B. Dabo, the Attorney General.
And Tarandang Minister Mena Wala Mabo Kono B. Mr. B.B. Dabo and Attorney General.
Minister of Education Satang Jau.
Minister Marling Londo Kunyala Satang Jau.
And Minister Bojang, who was said to be the uncle of Yaya Jammeh.
And Minister Bojang Dolko Walam Yaya Jammeh Abarinam.
And when the transition program was done,
in transitional program on Parera
and launched,
it
was advised that it should be promoted in terms of engaging the international community in the hope that they will restore their programs in Gambia.
Kidimandi ka wafi la kuoni wafi bankuni banga tema kafolma jikobe je ko asikeno e bela programme nying wala ye kodio men di Gambia la asikeno be o fale na le pour ye nyati li Gambia la kotange.
The mission was led by Captain Ibu Jallo. It also included Bala Jahumpa, Minister of Finance.
And Mr. Bala Gaba Jahumpa, the Mayor Marlin Fanko Kunyala, Bankoka.
The Governor of Central Bank, Clark Bajo.
Governor Membe Bankol Bela Banki Nyatonkol Memu Clark Bajoti.
Mr. Usman Koro Sise.
Mr. Usman Koro Sise of Anambeje.
Who was then the Principal Assistant Secretary, Office of the President.
And Principal Assistant Secretary, the President of our office. And
I think we also had Aliungom. But when we were on the mission, we realized when we got to New York and Washington, that there was really an ulterior objective to the whole mission, that we who were civil servants, which was only known to Captain Ibu Jallo and Usman Koro Sise. We were not happy about it. But when we came back, I was alleged to be keeping the mission report without handing it over. I was accused of it. Captain Singate called my minister and demanded the report.
Captain Singate na minister nying kumandi ka report nying kaning.
I told them I did not have it. I was then sacked together with my minister on the 20th of March, accused of sabotaging the efforts of the regime. I was happy to go. Subsequently, on several occasions, at least 3 occasions, I was offered the position of Attorney General to go back. But I had no intentions of serving Jammeh, because he will not allow you to serve your country. You have to serve him too. I was also offered the position of Chief Justice before Savage was appointed.
Chief Justice Chief Justice
I refused to accept it. I do not say these things in order to boast or anything like that. But I just want to emphasize, I was Solicitor General before Yaya Jammeh took over office. He found me in office. He did not appoint me. I have never served Yaya Jammeh. I served my country. There were horrendous human rights violations. But these were not enabled by the Ministry of Justice.
Certainly
not under my watch. Those responsible should be held responsible for it. I have submitted a statement about the role of what went wrong in the commissions of inquiry. Commissions of inquiry were not new. Yahya Jammeh did not create them. There were 2 statutes on commissions of inquiry before Yahya Jammeh. What was wrong is that people started to abuse their powers on the commissions of inquiry. Each and every commission of inquiry was presided over by a judge. This is not by accident. It is because judges, by their training, by their experience, were expected to uphold the law and to carry out their investigations fairly. But unfortunately, I think some commissions exceeded their authority, and the commissions became a cruel show. Many of their findings lacked substance. And notwithstanding that they knew that people's assets would be forfeited, as far as I am concerned, they failed, some of them, not all. Like the Algali Commission. And even after 1997, the Paul Commission. And the 2012 Singate Commission on Tax.
And in 2012, Singate Commission
in my opinion, these commissions violated the people's rights. There were commissioners like Justice Robin Coker on land, the Land Commission, who would call people and give them the opportunity to return the land without making a fanfare out of it if there was a finding that they got the land wrongly. Was he operating under a different set of rules than the other commissioners? He wasn't. But he applied the rules as he was expected to apply them. There was the Justice Vida Akotobamfo Commission.
Justice Vida Akotobamfo Commission.
She was responsible for government departments, the President, Vice President, and Cabinet Ministers. Up to date, nobody has seen her report. We knew she left because she refused to do what the regime wanted. Which was to make findings that fitted their narrative about rampant corruption and so on. Instead, what did they do? They passed decree number 79, I think, forfeiting the assets of first the President Jawara.
Decree number 79 dundi me alonko narna sababu President Jawara de kala sotofengol.
Then they passed another decree forfeiting the assets of all the other cabinet ministers that are listed in the decree. These are in the orders.
Inata decree do fanan ta yo fanan sabat fintindi ya londi ka ke luati inata menara na sembo di ka nunto minister cabinet minister bela sotofengol ta ka be ke bulola kan.
But they did not publish the report which justified their doing so.
Bari o report o nyin kabringi pareta e ma report o nyin ma bundun ka kibari ka lankene ma jama rahmano ye.
I represented Mr. Abdoulaye Bojang after under the 1997 Commission to challenge the forfeiture of his assets.
Intel naralo Mr. Abdoulaye Bojang ye pour kana ka ko nyin kusonson ka jibi ala ya la sort of nyin ta ya nyameng.
And finally, when the matter reached the Supreme Court in 2012,
bari nyala ba nyin birin ko nyin tar na futa kiti bumbara memo Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court held that having his assets having been forfeited under that decree,
Supreme Court na sabatindroke ko ala sota fengo nyi menata na ta mentata bulu decree nyi nomba nyi koto.
And since the jurisdiction of the courts were ousted,
stumala men na kidio nyi ala bulu nyi nyanta futa damene yo jankendile.
They could not do anything for Abdoulaye, Mr. Abdoulaye.
Mr. Abdoulaye Boja ite kukeno lae.
I think it was a tragic decision. That continued to uphold the sanctity of those decrees even after the democratic regime came into place. But I agree their hands were tied because the constitution of the Gambia still gave validity to these decrees. I think in this commission, is this TRRC? I think we have the opportunity of recommending that the structures that Jame has put in place which continue to exist in the form of the many provisions, the many undemocratic anti-human rights provisions in the constitution itself. That continue in the decrees that you can still find in the 2010 editions of the laws of the Gambia. If you look at volume 5, you will find the forfeiture of the assets of President Jawara in the law.
Volume 5 President Jawara
you will find the forfeiture of the assets of the ministers. There's a whole list. Just look at volume 5 and all those decrees that are published in volume 5. You still have the economic crimes decree, which is in our law. Economic crimes did not exist until November 1995.
Economic crime
it was a foreign concept imported from Ghana. But why is it in our law in 2021? Why have we maintained these decrees? I think that is what we should focus on. We have to find another blueprint. We have to examine all our laws and remove those provisions which enable Yaya Jammeh to continue even after the transition to trammel on our rights. I have had so many accolades from well-meaning witnesses in this commission. I am no hero. I try to do my best, and I believe I have done so. I lived up to my oath as a Solicitor General. I did not create the regime, the military regime. And I think it is only by grace of God that people escaped Yaya Jammeh's victimization. Even though I refused to accept appointments in his government, I also I also suffered some detriment. I don't consider myself a victim, but I did suffer some detriment for that. I learned not to send any petition to State House. He turned down any recommendation that had my name in it. And when I met him at a legal year, when I was president of the bar, in the office of the Chief Justice, he said to me in front of several ministers, what sort of person, what sort of citizen are you? You refuse every appointment you are offered. I told him I could not afford public service. Yaya Jammeh was a monster. I have no time to go through the findings of the commission. The Janneh Commission, and I'll just read briefly from my statement. The Janneh Commission, which I was proud to serve, from as early as August 1995, when they were recognized by Taiwan, which was the first country to do so. The regime set out to exploit the country for their personal benefit. On a massive scale, they deprive Gambians of resources needed for their development. They degraded the environment, set the country back 22 years, and deepened our poverty. The commission showed, the Janneh Commission showed, that there was direct theft of resources from central bank, direct theft from parastatals, unforgivable and massive deforestation of the country so that it could be converted to wood and exported for Yaya Jammeh's benefit. The sand mines, sand resources were depleted and exported for his benefit. He allocated himself public land. He appropriated land from individuals. He appropriated to himself. I really do recommend that you read Volume 3 on property of the Commission report. Volume 3 he discretionary terminated government contracts. And this country paid millions of dollars on arbitration awards against it. Just because Yaya Jammeh decided to terminate contracts without following any due process. He abused procurement rules in order to benefit himself. Louis XIV of France was known to say that l'état c'est moi, meaning he was the state. Yaya Jammeh believed that he was the state. There was no distinction between the state's assets and his assets. His greed knew no bounds. His greed, he was greedy. It knew no bounds. I'll just say this, that if you follow the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, There was a Sahaba called Abdurrahman ibn Auf.
Sahaba do be ka Abdurrahman ibn Auf.
He was known to be very rich.
And
he would spend over half his property just to support the Ummah and the Ansar in Medina. And he had a prayer. Allahumma akini sufi nafsi. And the prayer meant, God, oh Allah, protect me from the greed of my soul. If your soul is greedy, you can never feel it. I think he was one such person. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bensouda. I believe we've come to the end of your testimony. Mr. Chairman, before we end, I would like to admit some documents into evidence. Mr. Chairman, this is Bensouda's statement dated the 21st day of April 2021. That's Exhibit 218. She has also provided letters of appointment to the positions of Parliamentary Counsel as well as Acting Solicitor General and Legal Secretary. Your confirmation of that particular appointment. And lastly but not the least, her retirement letter from the Public Service Commission. I would like to include that as part of the record. That's Exhibit 219A, B, C, D, and E.
219?
A, B, C, D, and E.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I hand over the witness to you.
Thank you, Counsel. And merci beaucoup, Madame Bensouda. Thank you very much indeed for your testimony. And what I was going to say for the very good concluding remarks, but we come to your concluding remarks later on. But the points that you mentioned a few minutes ago were really very helpful indeed in setting the context in which we are carrying out our mandate. Very, very helpful indeed. Thank you very much. And my commissioners, if you have any questions, please indicate. Yes, Imam C, you have the floor.
Ajami, salamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Thank you so much for the testimony that you have delivered here. What I want to ask is that what is the difference between decree and a law?
Wow.
That's what I want to ask.
In our system, the laws are the laws that are made by the National Assembly or Parliament. Means the laws that are made by democratically elected National Assembly. And in our system, there is a distinction between those who make the law and those who implement the law or whom the law applies. Decrees are always used when what we know as laws are being made by an individual without who we did not put in who we did not elect, to put it simply. Since we cannot call the rules that he puts forward law, In our legal system, we call them decrees.
Na loi tamandri nyaron ka fole decrees.
So the difference, to put it shortly,
fato membe je wolen ka sutiyandi
is a rule made at the discretion of a person
wolen lu
or a group,
sardolde me alon ko kafude mo kilinna waraton kafo ya lati ya dundi ka ke luati,
as opposed to rules made by a body that is elected with the consent of the people. Elected by the people, which means it's put there with the consent of the people.
And me fatata nyinna me alon ko wol kana loi dol me alon ko na député me alon ko carte wala fayte wala loi me gondi wala ila fatoti.
That's the difference.
Wala fatoti.
On mom mungi melni mom loi dole la.
Then it seems like it is a law that is based on force.
Luko nek mu def luko den mu bay.
Whatever he wants, that's what he will do, and what he doesn't want, he will do it.
Parce que mangi don deg ne def don wax ne mangi sukkandeku ci digiri nangam mu def lu bon.
I heard that by then he used to say that I am completely depending on this particular degree to do a very bad thing.
That is true. He did not, unfortunately, he did not even comply with his own decrees. That's why military governments or authoritarian governments are bad. And that is why we should make sure that it never happens again.
Thank you. Commissioner Kinte, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Ajami. Oh, me kondona. Nimbara.
Okay, I'm greeting you. Thank you. I want to ask you a few things, one of which is, sometimes if you want to build a house, then you have to call upon the masoner and also the planner to show you how the plan should be done. The wideness of the house and the tools that are needed included the kitchen and other things that need to be in the house. Then the person will give instruction, go and build the house for me. This is the number of rooms I need, and this and that. That's what I also need in the house. After building the house already, then he will criticize it. He will tell you that this house, they are facing one another. It is opposite to one another. So this other door, you have to change it. You put it this way.
Yalo kamundo mari fongola bungo ate fongole hakilo ya mira ahamo bala ay lafo soto a Kenya la ay ebula la bare alondu tamando pruka tonkongol tembendi aninka la ko itele ono.
Then that shows that the person just instruct you to build the house for the person. But the way and manner the house should be structured, that are the corners, that will be done by the person who gave you the instruction to build the house. That is one out of all. Sometimes it used to be like this. You will see somebody's house over there. And the person will go to that said house to examine or to see the house, but he will not examine it properly to see everything what is included in the house. And the person will come back to you to say that this is the type of house I want exactly. What I want to ask you is, This building that you have instructed, you and Yaya Jammeh, which is the decree. That is what I made as the example. They told you that this is what we want in this area, that is the law side, which you have knowledge about. Or is it that they said to you people, we have took this country now, but the way and manner the country should run, we don't know how, and we want to seek advice from you people. These two things that I have put now in front of you, I want you to tell me, how do you able to go with it?
Okay. Thank you for that analogy. It's a very clever one, actually. I think it was more like the first. The impression I had before they overthrew the country, they had checked how other countries have proceeded, how other military councils had operated. I presume that's why in his first proclamation he announced the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council. This was 1 week before I came, the suspension of the Constitution. They had removed the ministers. They have arrested anybody who was a threat to them.
Minister Bondi, Dol Baile, and more Mialanko Ejikita ko itebe kala cylinder daleti to learning kuokono ye mutala ye bay.
They had a cabinet because they asked all permanent secretaries to act as minister.
Cabinet so the William Banco Alpha Mialanko lebe mansakunda ka for cabinet. Ye wol bondi le barinata muneke permanent secretary Mialanko lebe minister bundale ko ye fanga commissaire to lem Banco Alpha nyinti ka for minister.
So they had an architectural drawing, going back to your analogy.
But say ni wala nanko ko ne ko nyimbe jibe to kata fanna de Mialanko ye ko nyimbe jibe le ya deda ye ferol soto ye be milandi la ko kono.
Maybe what they did not have was the know-how as to how to build the drawing. That's why they needed a mason.
Wala na ngaje ko molle milialon ko imalon ko mi nyanta ka kenya de le pro bungo nyelo wala na tata masongo nyini.
So we at the Ministry of Justice, in that analogy, are masons.
Nte sang ntol milialon ko ntolebe minister bundala mi mata tilingoni ntonyala yentoleke la masongolti.
Of course, as a mason, you can advise that that pillar, if you want to do that, that pillar, the house will fall. Yes, so to that extent, you would advise.
But
they had a plan. Thank you.
And you have told us that at one point they recommended some amendments to some of the degrees in order to fine-tune it to suit their purpose.
Ya fonyala ko komi nata sutero dol kale komi mila ko wo degree lual mi alon ko wolle data ka to mondrol ke jele ko la mi alon ko isaje ko ise ko dol bonda ko na mi alon ko yalon ko woni ito lafta mina natita no nyola.
Decree number 1, the only new one was suspend political parties, political activity. I think it's worded actually, it's there. That is what they added. They called to say, can we add that?
Decree
that was decree number 1. And decree number 4, of course, Sana Sabali was responsible, and he did not want anything that affected his own authority over the detainees, but he agreed to the process.
Meaning, on the other hand, were they receptive to some of your fine-tuning inputs?
Yes. Commissaire, wokoto muneti natana sonneti itoleo jiberol minke coming profeta natasan so wala bang.
Yes, they accepted some, like all drafts, they accepted some. Usually most of the provisions were accepted. But anything that affected their authority, they don't accept.
Bari isonta fenjamal la jede bari koku min natan mi alonko anito lefta min na manta nyola iboko wota.
There are two provisions in the decrees that first, I'm not sure whether they were during your time.
Which decree?
That is to say, before the takeover, the maximum time you can keep a Gambian in custody without charge or so, 48 hours. But they have extended it almost indefinitely, 1 month or even indefinitely.
It's not that you have said it, but it has been said here before.
If I recollect rightly, you're talking about decree number 16.
Okay.
This is economic crimes decree. That was made 25th November 1994. That one which suspended trial by information, I think yes, it's decree number 16, section 175A to 175D in relation to bail was removed. This was made on the 25th November 1994. And was greatly influenced by the technical experts that came, Bright Equity, I believe. Because when they came, really, even when decrees were drafted by Cherno's department, they vetted the decrees. They advised the presidency directly. But I mean, I think you can call Mr. Cherno Jalo, because when I left, instructions always come through the Attorney General, so to the department. Not that I would not have an input. I would see the drafts as Solicitor General. But I recollect that the economic crimes decree from November, more or less, when the team came, the Ghanaian team came, they really influenced the decrees from November onwards.
Another concern about, because these were strong areas that enhance the junta. The other one is no court will have any power to challenge the decrees.
That's the outside clause.
That was also during the Ghanaians' tenure?
Actually, even decree number 4, as my learned friend pointed out, did have a provision not so drastic, but saying to the effect that the decree cannot be questioned. But these are common to all decrees in all countries. They're common to military decrees. It's nothing that is new. In other words, the military do not subject their decisions to the courts. So they are common. So I wouldn't say that the Ghanaian expert team sort of designed something unusual and new. No, this abound in all. And there are a great number of authorities around it. I mean, legal authority around it, the discussion around ouster clauses.
So it means the decrees themselves that the junta or normal military governments institute are not able to control excesses of they themselves, the junta.
Comme ça, comme doko, watol be kono natara sojar masakunda ye lual min londi faye ka fo decree. Ni tol mo kilngol mi anko tele wo lual ni londi. Sa ni landa tambe kuol ka kam doko wo lual ni ngate fen ate fenkele to labang.
In a normal, if I understand your question, in a normal situation, right, like on a democratic setting, if a decision is taken by any member of the executive, you can go to court.
You can refer to the constitution.
You know, these ouster clauses are still in our constitution.
Yeah.
It means even as of now, the courts are limited as to insofar as the decree is concerned. Still in our constitution. So that's why you have the second schedule to the constitution. It says you cannot question what happened during the transition period. It's still there. It's not something that's limited to that period. It still exists in our constitution.
Okay, thank you. Amie.
Thank you very much. There are no further questions. Madam Bensouda, if you have any concluding remarks to make, you may proceed to do so now.
Thank you very much. Just briefly, I think I did mention that, Mr. Chairman, in my humble opinion, really, and I do crave your indulgence for probably repeating it and raising it again. I have some concerns.
Come, Mr. Chairman, kuma kanga dol biji nga fole no nyato anda friend timba kuma kanga nyimba murunka kan kotenko kulbe jele mi yalon ko ko mata nyakoto bakele mil joko.
Decrees are how military governments rule.
Ye nyin decree je wala nyin luwalti milay ka fo decree ya je soldier man sakundali ka wala tani ba maralo kala.
Did we who help them draft these decrees control their content?
Fontol mi yalon contrôler mako pour ye nyin luwal nyin dada fontol kata molleti mi yalon contrôler nyin kotina.
No.
Kanyum kela ko londe mi yalay bo le kekan.
The Gambian people are listening.
Gambia dingol ibe la moy kan.
And I think it would be unfair, if I may put it that way, to lead them to believe that those who drafted these decrees were the authors and therefore have some responsibility.
And ata kala tlingote comme ni manyi seniyande ko comme mol mi yalon ko wolle nyin decree ke mako pour ya deda.
It would be wrong to lead them to believe that without these decrees, Jammeh's horrendous human rights violation would not have occurred.
Comme ya motako comme na tala no nyin decree nyin luwal nyi me deda ka fo decree comme ya jemela nyin tilimbal yal nyin tajri ya ko min be katanu denda ta kala.
These decrees did not enable Yaya Jammeh. The military was a totalitarian regime. What the decrees helped do was to introduce some coherence in the madness that we existed under.
Decree nyinga be minke kan wolen komi ika wo kuol minke wo nyamati ya kuol mi ana kake pour komi decree nyin natal pour que bondi wo konono wolen decree nyin na sababoti.
This process is extremely important.
Andu nyin ko nyinga kete fennati mi ala ka kumaya tabakele.
But if at the end of the day, the brutal machinery which Yaya Jammeh put in place is not dismantled,
but yaje labango ko labandula beto natara ya jema anyin tarambulol mi alonka wolle londe nyin tajri ya tarambulol natara manna ke wolbe bruka,
then it would be pointless.
Ibajala ko koto nyun ko beta na faso dola.
Because the system in place can be abused even under civilian government.
Mole be siring masakun president be siring mi alanka amanke sitifani moti han wotel wokul mi alanko eketa wotajiri ya ko la sekeno wala mansakunda kon.
After all, public officers are being dismissed. as we read from the papers.
Using
the same provisions. There is still a provision that judges' services can be terminated.
And
I hope that provision will never be invoked by a civilian president. So I do hope that blame will be allocated where it should be. Those who perpetrated the acts complained of. I thank you for having afforded me the opportunity to come. And I would like to commend the Commission for the work they are doing and the manner they have proceeded to do it. The country needs this. I hope in the not too distant future, we will be able to have another blueprint. And I hope part of your recommendations will be that we have another constitution. And that we should systematically remove all decrees from our legislation. Decrees should not be part of the laws of the Gambia as the Constitution provides. They have no place in a democratic society. They were meant for the transition. I know the transition lasted 22 years. Because by changing his uniform, didn't make Yahya Jammeh a civilian president, a democratic president.
Alala uniform falling ka uniform landi ka dung civilian parella o martin ko ala jiko ana manya femmam falinje.
It is time to change, and I hope Gambians will find the will
njikita ko falengo nyanta ka kel anu njikita ko Gambia dingol ibo hamo sotolal
to ensure that your recommendations are implemented.
Kajeko atol nying komisiono ye sutendir wo sutendir ka kajeko wo sutendiro ilota kan anda ketale ko komisiono ya fanyami.
That we can put the past to rest.
Isajeko kul mil tambitano kunun se landi.
And move forward in the interest of our country and our children and grandchildren.
Isajeko se continue kata bankoni yuruwandi kata nyaton dingol la kuol kamba ni mamarongol la kuol kamba.
And I hope when we look back,
when
our grandchildren come to judge what we have done, history is written. They will be able to say that the TRRC, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission, was the beginning of a new age for Gambia. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Bensouda, for your testimony and the concluding remarks you just made, as well as for the suggestions and advice you addressed them specifically to the TRRC. And fana ye mirol min di TRRC la comité fe mirol mi alango TRRC nyanta tamala wala ani ye sutendirol min fanake. Thank you again for coming to testify.
Mba fule ko kotenka baraka elena jankana sedi andirodi.
This brings us to the end of our proceedings today. And next public hearings would be on Thursday. The Commission would continue meeting. But we will resume the public hearings in the room here at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. Council, I don't know if I had indicated to you that your request for the exhibits are granted. If I didn't, confirm that now that they are granted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
This is
much obliged.
219 A through E.
That's right. And 218 as well. 218 and well. 219, okay. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. The meeting is adjourned.
Allah baraka.
Thank you all.
Albeya baraka.